Just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, Eskom has now announced that load shedding will be with us for the next 6 to 12 months. The utility has attributed this to the grid's vulnerability, maintenance and major repairs that will take place over the next few months. So what does this mean for the country? Let's get you some insights from independent energy analyst Clyde Mallinson, who joins us via our video link this morning. Clyde, good morning. Thanks very much for coming on. The outlook certainly is much, much worse for the next 6 to 12 months. But what's new about how we should have this conversation this morning?
Okay, so actually the outlook's not worse than expected. Some months ago, Eskom put a presentation to the Portfolio Committee of Parliament where they spelt out what they called a base case with an extra amount broken, and a base case with an extra amount broken. And that base case with the extra amount broken, they called the likely scenario. Now, for anyone who's ever done sensitivity analysis, your base case is not what you would like it to be. Your base case is what you think it's likely to be. So, in fact, what's playing out at the moment is the base case that Eskom said was likely to be. And so it's likely that what I'm saying now is that the base case basically has stage 2 to 3 load shedding permanently. That's the base case.
Yeah.
And any swing around that will be a swing down to 0 load shedding or a swing up to 4 or 5 or 6 load shedding.
So when I say much worse, Clyde, what I mean is, yes, as you say, Eskom did say this. They did foresee that this would be, as you say, the base case. But it certainly would be much worse than what we have been experiencing over the past however many years of load shedding.
Yes, look, it's basically what's being predicted now is what we've been experiencing over the last 2 months.
Right.
And as you and I know, over the last 2 months, we've pretty much had permanent load shedding.
We can all discuss what this means for our economy. We know the permutations insofar as what it means for a country to not have reliable energy supply, as is the case for South Africa. But what does it mean for Eskom in terms of the kind of money that will need to be spent? We know now that they have completely run out of money for diesel, as I understand it, which is a massive line item in its financials. What does this mean for Eskom, Clyde?
Basically, in very simple terms, Eskom is right on the edge. They're fielding a team of coal-fired power stations that are all carrying injuries. And if ever you put someone on the field of play that you know is carrying an injury, you kind of have that horrible feeling that they're not going to make it through till the end of the game. And what normally happens in sport is that the coach then looks across to the reserve bench and says, well, we kind of knew so-and-so was carrying an injury, but, we'll see if we can get 60 minutes out of him or her, and then put on a reserve. Well, at the moment, the reserve bench is empty. So we really, really are on a knife edge when it comes to electricity supply. And Eskom are more or less telling us that we must accept or be prepared for permanent load shedding for the foreseeable future, unless something dramatic changes. And unfortunately, they still are placing their hopes in improving the performance of that team, where each member is injured and every single member of that team is desperately in need of a rest, and they're all having to work that much harder because there are no reserves. And I'm afraid the artisans in the trenches, as I like to call them, are being tasked with something that they would know at the bottom of their hearts is not feasible. And I think that's what the problem boils down to now, is addressing the morale of the artisans in the trenches. Because as they said in the charge of the Light Brigade, someone had blundered. Theirs was not to question why, theirs was but to do or die. And at the moment, I think that the generals, if you like, are setting aspirational targets beyond what the artisans in the trenches actually know is feasible. And therein lies the problem.
Yeah. I mean, things that we were sort of applauding over the past few months of this year, new measures to try and bring additional capacity into the grid. You know, the companies, the corporates that are producing their own energy to get that additional energy into the grid, new markers around renewables, making it easier for renewables to fit into the grid. So are you saying that all of these measures, which we had been applauding, that they've just not made the kind of dent that we hoped?
Now, those are the measures, the only measures that will save us. So it's almost like we're trying to rebuild a team at the same time as expecting the old team to keep running. And we either must focus on patching up the old team or place the majority of our focus on building the new team. And it's obviously a balance between the two, because we need the old team to keep plugging away. But we should be setting targets for that old team where each year we expect slightly less from them, not slightly more. And we should be putting all of our efforts into building that new team, and the new team is the new renewable generation. So all hold should be unbarred, as it were, and we should be building that new fleet of renewable energy. And I've said this many times before, as if our lives and livelihoods depended on it.
Yeah.
And so the unfortunate thing is that anyone who knows anything about energy provision is that even this new fleet that we need to build, the renewable fleet, takes time. And it's time that we've run out of. And so we now are in a situation which I would call akin to a slow poison disaster of having permanent load shedding. And the only way we're going to pull ourselves out of this is to focus attention on facilitating and building that new fleet. So it's not just Eskom building that new fleet, it's Eskom facilitating or accommodating that new fleet into their grid.
Yeah, I see you're sort of stuck on sporting analogies. One can see that it's World Cup season, right? I want to continue with that because, you know, as you talk about the team on the field, so to speak, and we're talking about our power stations and our generation capacity and so on, there's the background coaching team as well in the form of Rulani Matebula, the acting head of generation at Eskom, who could only stay in the job for 6 months because of the incredible pressure and just the impossible task that he had at hand. You know, the loss of that kind of experience in the background surely must have an impact as well.
It's kind of the same as happens, and sorry to keep sticking with the sporting analogy. How long does a soccer coach of Pirates or Chiefs last if they lose six months of matches in a row? They never win a game.
Yeah.
And you see rotation of coaches in losing teams, and unfortunately, when you have load shedding, you've actually, I don't want to say you've lost, but you have lost. You've lost the ability to serve what the population of South Africa expects from you. And to make it even worse, you know, Eskom themselves are now saying we're going to have load shedding for at least the next 12 months. And they're still steadfastly going ahead with the refurbishment of Coburg. Now, Coburg, we know, and Eskom know this, when they take each of the units off at Coburg for refurbishment, it's effectively adding an extra stage of load shedding for the next year. And using Eskom's own figures, the refurbishment of Coburg, not the cost of the refurbishment, but the cost to our economy, is using their very conservative figure of 10 Rand a kilowatt hour for unserved electricity. It's going to cost our economy 87 billion Rand in lost economic performance because of refurbishment of Coburg. And then the actual refurbishment itself is going to cost 20, 30, 40, 50 billion. Now, for that sum of money, we could bring in renewable replacements, and we could let Coburg rather carry on running through this very difficult time to give us a little bit of respite from having an additional stage of load shedding for the next year. And by the time it's due to be formally shut down, we would have had the opportunity, if we treat it as an emergency, to build the necessary replacement so that it can be retired on its retirement date.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. One wonders how these decisions are being made, and in the meantime, that jolt that we need for economic growth to spur job creation is just put on the back burner. Clyde Mallinson, thanks very much for weighing in on this discussion. Independent energy analyst, as we continue to talk about the crisis around Eskom.